Well, hello everyone. This is Luis Plaza from the Let's Talk Micro podcast, and I am recording live from Micro 2025 in Los Angeles. I'm in a room here recording an episode, just like I have done the last 2 years. And basically, what I do is I share the posters that I like, the things that I enjoyed. As I'm a huge micro nerd, so I'm always looking for things to learn, try to find content. And bear with me, like this is the first time that I'm doing a live one like this, so the edited version will come out better. But so there's gonna be some pauses and things like that. I hope that if you're attending Microbe, that you're liking it. It's always a wonderful event. There's so much to do. In fact, that's one of the challenges that I will say is that sometimes you don't get to you miss some stuff because you have to pick and choose because of the time. There's so many wonderful posters, so many great talks, and then you have the vendors if you want to find out about all different sorts of instrumentation and things that are out there in the market. So I definitely recommend it. So if you haven't been to Microbe yet, I encourage you to try to maybe set some funds at some point in time. Hopefully your institution can send you, but I am telling you it's worth it. So as always, the event that I always enjoy the most. So this year, Battle of the Brains, as as I mentioned last year, this event is where it's like a kind of like a debate questions and in a way. So you get different groups from all parts of microbiology. You have people from like the public health sector. Sometimes, last year I was in a group called the Influencers where I got to participate. You have people from reference labs. So it's from all sorts of things, from within the microbiology, infectious diseases realm. And they ask some questions, so they compete. And then at the end, there's four groups, two compete, and then the other two compete, and then the winners compete against each other, and then there's a winner, an overall winner. So that's always a great event. Um, One of the things that I have enjoyed while here at Microbe, well, I had my event on today. I'm recording this on Sunday, June 22nd. Um, so my event was about communicating your science, making it visible, and it's always pretty cool. So I got to shout out about I got to talk about the podcast and how I create it, how I communicate science, some takeaways from this. So I mentioned to you a lot of those things throughout the episodes, but the Let's Talk Micro podcast, came from a place where I wanted to simplify things. I wanted to communicate science. This job that we do as medical lab scientists, it's very complicated. There's a lot of information, and sometimes finding the right resources and getting proficient with everything, it can be daunting and it's very time consuming. You have to build confidence to work in this job. You have to. If you don't have confidence, you are in for a very long day, which in turn probably is going to make your supervisor's day long as well because you'll be asking a lot of questions and potentially delaying patient care, right? Granted, we don't learn this overnight. It takes years of repetition and education, but at least, knowing what your resources are and reading them and educating yourself and seeing things over and over again, you start building that foundation, which in turn builds your confidence. So give me a minute here. I'll look at something. Okay, so moving on. It was great. I got to be on a panel of with two other people, and it was great. One of the panelists was Dr. Rodney Rohde, which, as you know, he's been on the podcast before from Texas. He's done episodes about monkeypox, dengue. Um, Overall, it did one about biofilms one time with Andrew Princey. He's always a great guest, very knowledgeable, and always very willing to help. So if you bear with me here one moment, I'm looking something here real quick. So then also on the panel, I had the ASM's director of communication, Leah Can, and all three of us just talk about how we communicate science. As you know, Dr. Khan, she mentioned it from a perspective, of publishing, and she talked about ASM. Dr. Rodi, he's been in the science circles for a while, so he talked about that, and then I of course talked about the podcast. But it was such a great experience, and I'm so grateful. I'm very happy. And as I mentioned, since late March, early April, ASM is supporting Let's Talk Micro. So that's always great that now my content, gets exposed to the large ASM members and things like that. So I'm very grateful for that. So this time, this particular micro meeting was a little bit different. In other years, I've done a lot more, like done a lot of lectures. I done I attended podcast sessions, posters. This time, I'm always trying to grow the podcast a little bit. So I've been focusing a lot on promoting the content, and I'm seeing what's out there. So I've been walking around doing a lot of posters and talking to people and letting them know that there's a resource out there called Let's Talk Micro. So I've been doing that. Um, so that's always very time consuming, but it's very rewarding because I get to share what Let's Talk Micro is. So in this particular episode that I'm doing live, I am gonna be I'm gonna be talking about mostly about posters that I've seen. And there is one huge theme this year, which is a topic that's very important, which is about rapid AST, so antimicrobial susceptibility testing. Something very important. And those of you that work in the bench, uh, do you know that, right, especially when you're dealing with things like blood cultures and the way that the workflow is. So you plate your organism, you grow it, and the next day you do susceptibility testing if applicable, and then one more day. So you get, the whole thing takes 2 to 3 days. Um, so there's a lot of instruments out there that they're presenting that can provide those susceptibilities in about 6 to 8 hours, and then you have different products. I mean, this is not an endorsement of anything; it's just mentioning what's out there. Um, but still, say that's the concept itself. That 6 to 8 hours. It's amazing, right? If you could have something like that. So there's some systems out there, and you see different presentations about whether doing it with direct colonies or direct from samples like blood cultures, and there are other things like urine and respiratory samples. So it looks very promising, and if this really takes off and continues, it will be great for the patients. You imagine you have a septic patient and you can have a good susceptibility report in 6 to 8 hours. That's amazing. The proper treatment choice. You're saving time from the patient being in the incorrect antimicrobial therapy, and you can potentially save their lives, right? So that's a very critical area. A lot of those patients that you see and with those infections, unfortunately, they pass away. So that looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna start talking about some of the posters that I done. And before I get done, it's always great to see people that listen to the podcast and bump into them. So shout out to Kelly Maddock. I got to finally meet her in person. It was great. Um, if the name sounds familiar to you, she's been a guest, a couple, like 3 times, yeah. So she did an episode about Pasteurella multocida and capsular types. She did an episode about veterinary microbiology, which I invite you to check out. She did she was in the careers episode, which the next person that I'm gonna mention, uh, which is Jessica D'Angelo. She's been listening for a while, and then she was a guest on the podcast about a careers episode. And I got to see her. I met her last year in person, but this time, I got to see her again and chat a little bit. So that's always very nice and rewarding when you see your awesome micro friends. And then I saw a few people that recognized me and talked to me, and so it's always great to know that someone, it's listening to this, and that it's helping them somehow, right? That's one of the main things of this podcast, which is to help people and simplify things and make this microbiology business, simpler to understand, right? It's a lot, and I say it over and over again. So, and those of you that I haven't mentioned, but I'm putting your names out there, but definitely great seeing you in person. Um, you know, Shout out to Nicole, that she's also, she's an instructor in a medical lab technician program, and she listens to the podcast, and finally this time I was able to meet her in person. So it is great. And also one highlight of this whole thing was that in a dinner that I went, I bumped into I saw Dr. Joel Mortensen, which was also amazing to got a chance to see him in person and talk to him. If the name sounds familiar, he's done a couple of episodes. One of them about the hospital in Guinea that he helped out with that, and he went there and taught the medical lab scientists there, parasitology and things like that. And so he shares his experiences and how's it going. So I invite you to check those episodes out if you haven't already. And then he also did one about body fluids and blood cultures. So, you know, once again, the take home from this is it's always great to see people that you have as guests or people that listen. That's one of the highlights of this event that I always love. It's just connecting and seeing people that you normally wouldn't see, right? So that's great. So let me talk about the posters. I'm not going to bore you a lot this time. So I have some highlights here, and of course, uh, those of you that know my organization, which has no affiliation to this podcast, um, but they were here, and I'm not going to mention it, but they were here. A lot of my coworkers had posters. So shout out to them. Shout out to, of course, Dr. Jose Alexander, Daniel Navas, um, um, Long Ho, Hershey Mirables, Angela Charles. They had a lot they had a lot of presentations here. Between posters and talks, and it's always great to spend some time with the group. Especially outside of the workplace, and seeing them do well. So shout out to everyone. And so let me go ahead and go over the posters real quick. And so first one that I took, it's this is from I saw them on Friday. So is it time to finally spare carbapenems? Um, and this is a summary from basically an evaluation from cefepime and metazobactam, which show 100% in vitro activity against ESBL producing and cefepime resistant spice organisms. And the authors for this was Long Ho, Daniel Navas, Jose Alexander, Angela Charles from Advent Health Orlando. There is also a multi-site clinical evaluation of the life scale AST system. Um, Once again, this is not an endorsement, but it's just that this system showed reliable performance for rapid AST directly from blood cultures. And this is from Affinity Biosensors. This one, it was pretty interesting, especially since I did a talk about sulbactam durlobactam last year. And this is sensitizing NDM1 Acinetobacter to sulbactam durlobactam with low polymyxin B. Authors Lindsay Rutner and Thea Brennan Krohn from Beth Israel, Deaconess, and Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And basically, with this, as you know, sulbactam durlobactam, which in the last microbe I talked about it, and you're using it for this crab carbapenem resistant Acinetobacter baumannii, and some of these isolates, they have a that are NDM1, so they have a high resistance to sulbactam durlobactam. So this study showed that they did a combination where like some synergy with some low concentrations of polymyxin B, and that kind of restored the activity. So it brought the minimal inhibitory concentrations down. There's also single cell microbiology platform evaluation. This one is for pattern bioscience, and they're showing this assay where for identification of organisms and AST. There's some posters about they're doing studies on urines, on respiratory samples, and blood cultures. Once again, this is not an endorsement. I'm just mentioning what's out there. So this is one of the things. By now, I mentioned couple of posters about rapid AST. So you see, it's definitely a trending topic, and it's something that, as I mentioned before, if it works well, it's a huge plus for your patients. Let's see. Another one was keeping up with bacteria, BCID panel enhancements. This is to those of you that use the ePlex. There was a poster about they updated the BCID panel to improve inclusivity for resistant strains like E. coli and Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Um, Evaluation of organisms, coverage in rapid ID systems. So different rapid blood ID systems, they were compare and see how they did with clinically relevant pathogens. And this is from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Pathogenicity of Corynebacterium striatum. Um, so basically, with this one, this institution, they got Molotov and they started identifying more organisms, and they did some susceptibility testing on Corynebacterium striatum. This one was very interesting. Ceftazidime versus Stenotrophomonas maltophilia in vitro veritas. And this was pretty cool poster. I mean, one of the things that the person that I was speaking with, he was saying um, that sometimes with the Mueller Hinton, one of the mechanisms for resistance, is zinc related, and the Mueller Hinton um, apparently it can provide that zinc. So the body sequesters it, but so they were trying to see if basically these strains were actually resistant to ceftazidime. So they did some testing, and they did some, and they tested some strains and what is this? In a Mueller Hinton that was removed. That they removed a bunch of things and like a bunch of ions, and it seemed that it did a little better. Like some of the activity seems to have been restored. So, oh wow, this one was actually very interesting. And obviously, I'm just doing very short summaries. If you attend the microbe, I'm mentioning the title, so go and check them out. Um, but this one was AST accuracy and proficiency testing for gram negatives, and this is from the American Proficiency Institute. Um, so basically, the summary of it was that most labs accurately reported resistant genes, but lab developed tests led to inappropriate reporting of some genes like OXA and some gram positive genes. I know, like the ladies that I talked to, they mentioned like MEK, um, VAN-A for vancomycin. So they were reporting that with gram negatives. And according to them, sometimes, when the institutions are called and you ask them about that, um, some people don't understand that that's an issue. They're like, okay, why is this wrong? And so I think that the take home for message for this is that, right, we have to make sure that we're properly educated in what we're reporting and putting out there. Cephidurical COM ASP evaluation. So this one was from Vanderbilt University Medical Center. By the way, shout out to Vanderbilt. Uh, I did. I saw, right, what they do looks like so cool, right? For lack of a better word. um, but they do a lot of group projects out there, and one of them was where they evaluated the cephiderical um, ASP from League of Field Chem and against a broth microdilution, and they compare the results. And there was also another one from Vanderbilt that I just saw today, where they were did some susceptibility testing on micrococcus and evaluating the penicillin breakpoints. They were using the CLSI M45, which we're all waiting for it to be for the latest edition, right? It hasn't been updated since 2016. Let's see. Then there was another one about gram stain reproducibility across specimen types, where significant inter-reader variability found in gram stain interpretations. This is also for pattern bioscience. But this is interesting, and this is something that we see in the site, right? Sometimes two or three people look at something, and they all provide a different answer, right? And there's always a challenge with gram stains and matching the cultures and things like that. So that's definitely an ongoing process. So, and then there was another one that I saw that so bottom line, we definitely need to continue doing more training, right? Try to see if how we can standardize things. But it's always a challenge to how we see things and how we report things, and so that poster show a variability about how people overall, they were given the same sample, like about four people, and they were looking at the gram stain, and there was some variability in the way that they were reporting things. Yeah. And this one, once again, it's not a shout out, but I just saw this rapid MIC um, overview, and this is from Hardy Diagnostics. But anyway, they explained it to me, and the one thing that I saw was that I saw that, this is for like gram negative, um, like a rapid MIC, and then one of the posters that I saw that was very, very, very interesting. And if you bear with me one moment, I'll look it up right away. Rapid susceptibility testing of cefiderocol directly from positive blood cultures using a microfluidic agar diffusion assay. So this rapid MIC, they're starting doing testing with some of this, like last resort MDRO drugs, and they evaluated cefiderocol testing. So very interesting. The one that I mentioned for the micrococcus from Vanderbilt, it's evaluation of penicillin breakpoints for micrococcus species. Oh, and this one was pretty cool. From the Mayo Clinic, description of three new species of Dryocola, Dryocola mayonis, Dryocola sharpii, and Dryocola baroni, isolated from human clinical samples. So this is some gram-negative runs or facultative species of Corynebacterium. I think it's Corynebacterium mayonis, mayonii. Um, don't quote me on that, but just keep that in mind. That one is published. So I think if you type Corynebacterium mayonii or Mayo Clinic, they can direct you to the article that you can find online. That one was published, I believe, in January of this year. Um, well, those are some of the experiences that I had, um, and I have really enjoyed my time. It's coming to an end. I have a podcast recording, which I will release at a later time. That one is not gonna be live, but it's good content, so stay tuned. As always, shout out to ASM, A for having my podcast on their platform, B for having me here and allowing me to talk about the Let's Talk Micro. And actually, they provided me a room this time, which I asked, and they gave me a room to record this episode, to live stream this episode, which is great because on the prior years, I'm always sitting out there, and so it's we never know. I never know when I'm gonna find a good spot. So I think my goal in the future is to have a podcast episode like a at the ASM studio while microbe is happening. So that will be a great chance for to connect with some people and have a live audience. Well, um, if you're listening to this and you are in microbe, I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Uh, if not, if maybe if you register or make sure that uh, check out these posters. Look up the abstracts in the app and see more about them. But very interesting. So as I stay tuned, thank you for the support. Great things coming your way. And as I always say, continue bringing that passion to what you do. It's so important. You do such great work. And shout out, definitely last but not least, shout out to Rebecca Yee, which she put the whole ASM event together, and she's always a supporter of the podcast. So thank you. Um, so please, as always, stay motivated, stay safe, and of course, continue talking micro live from ASM. This is Louis from the Let's Talk Micro podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.